I think I am. Yes. Okay, let me share. All right, can you see me?
Got it.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think this is where we left off. It looks like we just finished up the last section. And so, again, we're just going to dive in. And the topic in this section is, what does he expect of me? It's interesting. I don't know if anybody saw my blog post. I get fewer and fewer readers, it looks like, but it kind of touches on this. As I started to prepare this evening, I was like, okay. But that Hebrew sentence, who knows what it says, just from perhaps the way you think it sounds when you try to read it, right there at the top. Anybody?
It's who separated between the holy and the sons of?
No. Bain. Okay, lehavdil, bain and bain. You have to have bain twice in order to say between. Okay. So bain hakodesh uvein hachol. So that's between the kodesh and between chol. Okay. So it's not son, it's bain, which means between.
Okay.
But very good, because that is what it means, to who separates, or in order to separate, havdil, havdalah. That word is a root, comes from the same root as havdalah. To separate between the consecrated and between the ordinary or the profane. You don't have to say it twice when you're translating it, because we don't say it that way in English. So since the very beginning, it has been expected of us, mankind, that we would be able to distinguish between good and evil, between clean and unclean. You could also add there what?
Light and darkness?
Light and darkness. What else?
Right and wrong.
Right and wrong. What else? They're staring you right in the face. We already said it. Consecrated in the ordinary. Okay. So all of those things are opposites that are what we could look at as sort of features of the two kingdoms that are at war. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, the temptation in Gan Eden was that the very first time that man chose to experience evil rather than to learn from Elohim what it is and to stay away from it. So what do I mean by that? To experience evil rather than to learn what it is from Elohim. Anybody?
They probably could have simply just asked Elohim, about the trees, and he probably would have explained everything to them, but they had to take it upon themselves to go and do it.
Yeah. So the word there is ladat, and it is at the basic level. It does mean know, K-N-O-W. But it's more than that in the Hebrew than it is in the English mind. In English mind, knowledge is very, it's almost kind of one-sided. It's a fact that you are aware of almost, Whereas da'at in Hebrew implies intimacy. It implies interaction. It is used for intercourse. sexual intercourse in the scriptures. So, and I'm saying that not to pervert things, but to just let you know what the nature of that root word is, and that is that this is something more than just cognitive awareness. Okay, so Adam and Chava became very familiar with evil. They already knew good or experienced good, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Yes.
They walked in the presence of the creator of the universe. And so now they had to, or they were tempted to experience evil rather than just learn what it was and stay away from it. Okay. Staying away from evil is what makes the people of Elohim different from the rest of the world. This difference is not because we think we are better, and nor are we better. And I think that right there is one of the major issues among believers, is that we tend to get an attitude. Believers tend to get an attitude that somehow other people are less righteous than we are on an order of magnitude in some people's minds, and that's just wrong. So it is merely us making certain that we become distinctly consecrated for the purpose of service to Elohim. What Hebrew word might I be defining right there?
Devoted.
Nope.
Kadosh.
Kadosh.
Oh,
Look at the next sentence. That's what it means to be holy. Holy. I have been using consecrated in our translation, and when I am sort of commenting on Kadosh, and the reason that I'm doing that, who can guess as to the reason why I'm doing that, not just using the word holy? Anybody think they figured me out?
I would say too, probably simply because the Christian community has watered down the word holy, for one, and consecrated means more set apart and separated from.
Yeah, people have in their mind what holy is. I literally sat in a congregation that my wife was familiar with. It wasn't her congregation, but way back early in our marriage, and some of you know that my wife was a United Pentecostal believer when I met her. And so we went to one of those congregations one Sunday, and one of the people in the congregation stood up and just was going on and on about holiness. And all they could talk about was their clothes, what they wore. That's what made them holy. They called it, and they probably still do, holiness dress. In other words, these women thought that if they piled their hair up and wore high collars and long sleeves and long skirts, that's what made them holy. And they walk about with a sense of arrogance about them. And they're really, that particular denomination really does, more than some other denominations, look down their noses at people who aren't like them. And so holy, the word holy then in the modern day, especially in America, takes a lot of baggage with it. And so consecrated does not. A lot of people don't know what consecrated means. And so what the goal is to say, either let me allow them, have them allow me to give them the definition, or maybe they'll go look it up and find out what consecrated means, because it's basically the same thing. But it's distinctly consecrated for a specific purpose. And for us, it's in service to Elohim. So that's what holy is. Okay? It's not some sort of social air that we put on. And unfortunately, that's the baggage that comes with it. Holiness is separation from the ordinary. That was our Hebrew sentence up here. Separation from the ordinary, the profane, or what is common, the common ways of this world. Okay, so we are commanded to be consecrated, to be kadosh, to be separated and distinct from the rest of the world. It's not contingent upon who our parents are or what building we might go to for assembly, or what you wear. A tallit doesn't make you more holy. Unfortunately, in the Messianic community, there is that air, I learned that some people that you'll probably already know where I'm trying to avoid going. But people they tend to think when they put on a tallit that they're somehow special, and that is what gives them dignity and authority. And that in no way does it. Any jackass can wear a tallit, it's not contingent upon who our parents are, what building we go to, where we assemble, but on our desire and effort to do his will. And I'm going to interject something right there, and perhaps it should be modified in the text. Our desire, that hour there is very specific. Who is that specific to?
To his followers.
Be more specific.
Our congregation in particular.
No. That's too specific.
Can't ever get in the middle.
When you say our, you could either be talking about the individual or you could be talking about all believers.
Well,
Mankind in general.
no, not mankind in general. All believers is right, but it's almost too broad a brush still, because there are people who think they are believers who do not actually believe. So the thing that I'm getting at is people who have put their trust in the death, burial, and resurrection of Yeshua in order to receive tzedakah, righteousness. Righteousness and holiness are two different things. Okay? So, and we've talked about righteousness to some degree in this study, I think. So who can sort of give me a nutshell definition of what tzedakah or righteousness is?
Being in right standing in the eyes of Elohim.
Being in right standing with God. Being able to stand before God and petition him and without fear of judgment, and knowing that he is your father, and having no guilt to bear in front of him. That's what tzedakah is. That's what righteousness is. But what we're talking about is holiness, and only those people can actually become kadosh, because everything else is rags. Didn't Yeshayahu say that? That's what Israel was trying to do, is make itself worthy on their own, make themselves worthy on their own merit. And when you're trying to make yourself worthy before God on your own merit, that is not holiness. It's not righteousness. It's a perversion. And there's a lot of people that do that. So that hour right there is very, very specific. Okay? So the Hebrew word for holy is kadosh. And there you see it if you're looking to write it down. It's highlighted, those three letters at the top. Lekadesh, hakodesh, kadosh. Right there is sort of the more common conjugation of it for the noun form. It is the concept of separation. So yes, we are to be distinct from the rest of the world. So someone who believes, like we talked about in this hour right here in that sentence, someone who believes in the requisite way that we just talked about, are they always holy?
No.
No, they're not. Sometimes we do things that bring us back into the realm of the common, the unclean, the ordinary, the base. So that's something that we have to be cognitive of, okay? So we are to be distinct, however, from the rest of the world. A sentence you might put as a reference, be in the world, but not of the world. Okay, that's exactly what the writer is talking about here. So
I can see circles in your eyes from this side, but not that side.
in short, we are to be like Mashiach. And there are places where he was called the Holy One of Israel, right? And so that's what Kadosh is. Kadosh is the adjective that means consecrated, commonly rendered as holy. Consecrated for a particular sacred purpose. He says this 3 times in the book of Vayikra, for I am Yahweh, your Elohim. Consecrate yourself. That's the verb form of lekadesh. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and you be kadosh, for I am kadosh. Okay? And in 19:2, you shall be kadoshim. What does that mean?
Set apart ones.
Set apart ones, consecrated ones, holy ones. It's not wrong, but again, we're just trying to avoid the baggage that comes with the word holy. It's not wrong. Don't feel wrong for using it. It's right, but it just has baggage with it. Consecrate yourselves, therefore, and be kadosh, for I am Yahweh your Elohim, and that's Vayikra 20, verse 7. And the Shaliach Kefa, who can say what a Shaliach is, just for future viewers' sake?
Apostle?
An apostle, a sent one. Therefore, gird up the loins of your mind and be wide awake and hope for the joy that is coming to you at the revelation of Adonenu Yeshua HaMashiach. Like obedient children, not partakers again in those sinful desires for which you once lusted in your ignorance, but be kadosh in all your conduct, as he who has called you is kadosh. So Kefa there is echoing the 3 sentences that we just looked at out of the Torah, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
Because it is written, be kadosh, even as I am kadosh. And so Kefa is referencing back to Vayikra 11.
Tackle box.
Put it in the tackle box, that's right. Vayikra is the instructions for consecrated living, which Abba gave to Yisrael. And just if you don't know it, in more Orthodox circles of Judaism, probably even in some Messianic circles, but I'm not sure because a lot of Messianics are just kind of Hebrew-flavored churches. But in more Orthodox societies of Judaism, you find that they begin the instruction of their children in preparation for Bar Mitzvah by studying Vayikra. And that almost seems counterintuitive because that's a hard book, isn't it?
It is.
And you're going to start 9 and 10-year-olds in that book and younger. But that, and in some ways that's a distraction for the Jewish people because, again, they think that it's their effort to do these things that makes them righteous. Okay? They have it backwards. Be holy and therefore you're righteous, you know? And of course, we are made righteous by the blood of Yeshua and our trust in it, and then we become holy in appreciation for what Yeshua did. And that really should be the mantra that drives our mindset. As it's almost an attitude of gratitude more than anything else. And a reflection of our desire to be light to this world, okay? Those who are born into Israel, either by natural or spiritual birth, are called to live according to his standards. His standards are clearly expressed in his Torah. What do I mean by that? Born into Israel by natural or spiritual birth. I'm going to put an and there.
By receiving Yeshua and being grafted in.
Right. By receiving Yeshua, whether you're Jewish or Gentile. Okay. we're called to live according to his standards. His standards are clearly expressed in his Torah. Vayikra gives us the details. Devarim, book whose name means the words, which has in it the 10 words, what most people call the 10 Commandments. They're also in Shemot. These are a summary of what it means to lead a life of tzedakah, the life of a tzaddik. What does that mean?
Righteous one.
A righteous one, someone who is consecrated for Elohim. These words summarize all that is written in the other 4 books of the Torah. What words? That might be a little clunky at the paragraph. The 10 words are the ones that summarize everything that is written in the Torah. Did y'all pick up on that? I think the way I read it and tried to break it down, I was a little clunky in that.
Yeah, I got it.
Yes, you're referring to the 613 traditional commandments, I guess, right?
Well, I'm referring to all of the words of the Torah.
Okay. All right.
The 10 words summarize those. The 10 Devarim summarize. They are a summary of the whole Torah. Vayikra gives us details about being kadosh from chapter 17 all the way through 19. So as you study for your Bar Mitzvah, read through these chapters very slowly. Talk with your teacher. Now, you got to remember, this book is written for children who have someone teaching them this book. That's the teacher that this is in reference to. Obviously, if you are with Mikdash Me'at and you don't have something that you understand, you go to someone. It doesn't matter who. You don't all have to flood me with your questions, but just go to someone and work out your question. If 2 of you can't figure it out, then you can come to me. But so that's what that's talking about. Engage yourself in the Word of God and understand those 3 chapters better, because there's a lot of things in there. And really, if you study the 10 Commandments, those chapters, both versions of the 10 Commandments, where are they? Where do they live?
Devarim and Shemot.
What chapters?
20 for Shemot.
Yeah.
Vayikra. Hold on, and then Devarim.
That's the worst thing I have. I can tell you what it says. I can almost quote it word for word. I just can't tell you where it is.
It's in Devarim 5. Okay. So a good initial place to start to understand what kadosh means, being set apart for God, is Exodus 20, Devarim 5, Deuteronomy 5, and Vayikra 17 through 19. Pay attention to when the congregation reads these portions during the year. Okay, all of the commandments in these chapters roll out of the 10 Devarim. And the chapters specifically it's talking about there are 17 through 19 in Vayikra. All of those mitzvot roll out of one of the commands that are given in the 10 Commandments. Everybody understand that?
Yes.
Okay. Do your best to memorize them. That's the 10 Devarim. Memorize them in Hebrew if you can. And there's a verse to encourage you to do that. Your word have I laid up in my heart that I might not sin against you. Okay, so the Torah is our guidance. And I might be getting ahead of myself, but I'm going to go ahead and do it because you guys are adults. The Torah is our guidance toward the perfection of Yeshua. And there is a verse that we've talked about already that explains that. And it's in the book of Romans. Does anybody know where I'm going? What verse I'm going to? If anybody remembers, Joe, I think it would be you because it's a bit country.
It's a big country.
Yeah.
Now you got me thinking a second guessing what I was going to say.
The little memory trick that I gave this country, let me say it that way. Romine, 10-4, good buddy.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Daniel,
Yeah.
have you written a song in Hebrew that would help us memorize the 10 Devarim in Hebrew?
I have not.
I was hoping you had.
However, they have been sung in synagogues, so you could probably find that.
Okay.
And I can attempt to find that if someone has trouble. But yeah, if you just search for cantoring the 10 Commandments, you might find it.
Okay.
So the verse you're looking for, is that the one where he says to imitate me as I imitate Messiah?
No, Romans 10:4. Can we find it? Or do I need to go there?
I can find it, Daniel. But, I'm almost there.
I got it. I'm in my fingertips. It's no big deal.
Okay. I've got it too if you want me to read it.
Go ahead.
Okay. For Mashiach is the perfection of the Torah. For Zedekah to everyone who trusts.
There you go. Mashiach is the perfection of the Torah. And the way that the Greek reads, you can translate it and the way that English translations reads is a little very weak, that for Christ is the end of the law. And so if you took that word end and actually defined it the way the Greek actually says it, it's very similar to this. Our word in the Aramaic is perfection, but the word in the Greek is the goal. So you could translate it Messiah, Christ. Messiah is the goal at which the law aims. And that's better. Okay, but here I think is the best. For Mashiach is the perfection of the Torah. In other words, he did it perfectly. All right? For Tzedakah to everyone who trusts. Because he did it perfectly, he gives us righteousness when we trust in him. It's that simple. Okay? So that perfection then of Yeshua is summed up in the 10 Devarim. Okay? Anochi Yahweh, lo yeh lecha Elohim achrim, lo tisa et shem Yahweh Elohecha lashav, zachor et yom hashabbat lekodsho, kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, lo tirtzach, lo tinaf, lo tignov, lo ta'aneh vera'acha ad shaker, lo tachmod. So those are the 10 Devarim. You need to memorize them. It'd be good to memorize them in Hebrew. I can tell you this, when a temptation comes that is clearly relevant to one of these mitzvot and I speak it in Hebrew, we're done. That's how Yeshua fought.
Awesome.
Right? Just a little bit more peanut butter. Lo tachmod. Peanut butter is my one weakness. And like I said in other teachings, Hamad, that last one, lo tachmod, do not covet. All of the others kind of roll out of that. They're all related to that in any way. The rapaciousness of our flesh for junk. Okay. These are the 10 Devarim as quoted from scriptures. The numbers are verse numbers and not the numbers of the mitzvot. The picture above is how they are counted as 10 words. What that means is, if you were to Google the 10 Commandments, you'd get several different versions of them because of religions that have come along and modified them. This is the most, in my view, the most orthodox separation of the words into the 10 words. The verses, the numbers that you're looking at right here, however, don't view them as the number of the mitzvah, okay? It's the number of the verse. Elohim spoke all these words saying, and what you have here is the transliteration of the Hebrew. And so if you wanted to practice learning them,
So is the transliteration under the Hebrew and English portion?
yes. So this sentence applies to that.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that, because I can read it, but then I can verify it with the transliteration. Thank you for doing that.
No problem. And I can record them if anybody wants me to. And I don't know,
Yeah.
text it
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
so that you
That
guys
would
can
really
practice.
be good. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. Somebody will have to remind me.
Okay.
So we can just read them, I suppose. I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. Okay. So I want you to see up here, that's the verse that has two of the mitzvot in it. Anochi Yahweh is the first one. That's that very top line. I am Yahweh. That's the first mitzvah. The second one is Lo yiyeh lecha Elohim achrim. You shall have no other gods after me. No later gods before me, before my face. Okay? You will not make unto you a graven image, nor any manner of likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. And that's summarized right here. Look, well, where is it? That's still part of that second command. You shall have no other gods before me. And so he's going on and saying, don't make any other gods. Lo tisad shem Yahweh Elohecha lashava. Do not lift up the name of Yahweh in vanity. Okay, that's all the way down here on verse 6. So you can see the verses that make up that second mitzvah are 3, 4, and 5, right? So you might want to annotate that on your book.
So Daniel, what you're saying is that the second, quote unquote, not the second, but the second in the ordinal is that, you know, you'll make no other God before me. And then where we have the third here is you'll not make any graven image. Does that mean like a graven image of a God?
Yes.
Okay. And then number 4 is you won't bow down to that graven image of the other God, basically.
Right. So verses 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all rolled up into that second line in this image up here. Lo yiyeh lecha Elohim acharim. You shall have no other gods. Okay, and yeah, so that's the details of, he's being very specific of what people do to make other gods. Is everybody with me?
So he's serious. He's like, I'm not messing around. I'm spending an extra 3 verses basically to explain how serious I am about
Pretty
it.
darn serious, yes. And so, and you know, the Catholics kind of like to jump over these verses or explain them away because they bow down to a lot of things and they call them divine. So, in reality, the things and the people that the entities, because they're not people, the things and the entities that they pray to are lesser gods. They're later gods. They deified Mary finally in the 5th century, if I remember right. They made her the vessel of salvation itself in the 1900s. I want to say it was in the 1920s. It's been a long time since I studied it, but so they have done violence to these 4 verses, okay? And in a lot of ways, so have a lot of other believers. So I'm not trying to single out the Catholics. It was just the easiest one to point to. But then you have all the nations around us that certainly do violence to these verses. Okay, and then on the heels of that, he says, do not take the name of Yahweh your Elohim in vain, for Yahweh will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. Okay, so what does that mean?
Like to cause his
don't-
name to come to ruin, or to
Yeah,
make
or
light of his
become
name?
common.
To use it for ordinary things, to use it for vanity's sake, to use it for unholy things. Yeah.
Could it be also to not teach his character? To it's not just what they're doing, but also what they're not doing.
Absolutely. It's not only what they're saying, but it's also behavior or the lack of proper behavior. Absolutely. To walk around with a shirt on while you're cheating on your wife. A shirt that says, what would Jesus do? Well, he certainly wouldn't be walking with someone else's wife.
Right.
So it involves a whole lot more than just what most people think it means is don't say GD or JC. Well, those things might border on that, but it's so much more than that. And of course, his name is that 4-letter name that we revere so much. And maybe that's why I was thinking about it this week, because our Jewish people don't say it. A lot of our Messianic people don't say it. The Messianics who do fight over how to say it. And I think in doing that fighting, they make a mockery of it sometimes. They get judgmental about people who don't say it their way. They make it a salvation issue. If you don't say Yehovah, or if you don't say Yahushua, or if you don't, they've got all these ridiculous man-made junk rules that have no basis in fact, and they turn them into commandments of their own, and they judge people by them, and that is taking his name in vain. And they don't see that. They're debasing his name by doing that. It's like kicking God out of the judgment seat and taking his place. So, we have to be careful of a lot more than just slipping up when we bash our finger. Zachoret Yom HaShabbat lekodsho. Remember the Shabbat, to keep it kadosh, to make it distinct. That's how I would like you guys to think about that, to make it distinct from every other day of the week. And there are specific ways that God has told us to make it distinct. The most obvious is to assemble. We don't assemble on the other days. We assemble on the days that God told us to. And what does Yom HaShabbat mean literally?
Day of rest.
Huh?
Day of rest.
Seventh day.
The day number 7. Yeah. It's also the day of rest, because to Shabbat means to finish, which means if you're done, it's time to rest. So there is a connotation of rest in it. But literally it means to the day of completion, the day of 7, the 7th day. And he goes on, if you were to go on and read that in Exodus 20 or Deuteronomy 5, you would see, for in 6 days I created the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day I rested. Therefore you also shall rest from all your work. Okay? But just remember that it is specifically the 7th day. And so we have to make that particular day distinct from every other day. There it is, verse 8. I forgot that I was putting all these verses in here. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the 7th day, and so he's being very specific. Yom HaShevi'i. So he is calling Yom HaShabbat by its ordinal number. Yom HaShabbat is the name of the day. It's the only day of the week that has a name in the Bible. And that is Yom HaShabbat. That's its name. Yom HaShevi'i means the seventh day. So he's being very specific. Not the sixth, not the fifth, not the first. The seventh day is a Shabbat to Yahweh, your Elohim, which we were commanded to believe in the first mitzvah. In it you will do no manner of work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor manservant, maidservant, nor your cattle, or stranger that is within your gates. Nobody in your house is going to work. And then in verse 10, for in 6 days, you could group these verses with mitzvah 4, which is Shabbat, okay? And that's starting on verse 7 and going all the way through verse 10. So all of those are about Shabbat.
Daniel, I love the suggestion that you gave. You probably gave it 6 months ago, which is that don't do anything to benefit yourself.
That's right. Stop building your own kingdom. That's right. Stop enjoying your ordinary pleasantries. The next one in verse 11 is the fifth one. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which Yahweh your Elohim gives you. Pretty simple. And Shaul points out that that's the only one that comes with a promise. And then the next 5 are very simple, very plain, and wrapped up in these 2 verses. You will not murder. You can't get around that. That's so plain. It's just 2 words. Lo tirtzach. You shall not murder. You will not murder. It is in the future tense, if you're wondering. It's not in the imperative. It's in the future tense. Lo tirtzach. You will not commit adultery. You will not steal. You will not bear false witness against your neighbor. You will not covet your neighbor's house, his wife, his manservant, his maidservant, his ox, or his donkey, or anything that is your neighbor's. Okay? I want to talk about Tirtzach. We'll briefly talk about that. If you look at those chapters, and in Exodus chapter 20, you might want to put that down because you guys are adults. Add to your list a while ago of Deuteronomy, Shemot 20, Deuteronomy 5, Vayikra 17 through 19. Add to that chapters Shemot 20 through 23, because really, if you want an in-depth study of the mitzvot, because you guys are adults, I'm willing to give those to you. Make that part of your studies in order to understand what it means to be kadosh. Because you're going to see that there are different forms of murder. There are different forms of adultery. The word there, tinaf. Okay? Adultery is not just a man cheating on his wife or a wife cheating on her husband. There's other sexual sins that roll out of that. All the sexual sins roll out of that. Okay? You will not steal. There's many forms of theft. Can you think of one that's different than just stealing a piece of bubble gum? Bueller?
Maybe taking credit for something that you didn't do.
Yeah, possibly. In my view, the vote is being stolen in this country right now.
Yeah.
Embezzlement, you can steal money without putting your hands on it, can't you?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying, is that these mitzvot, a whole lot of things roll out of them. These are sort of the base of the tree of that particular sin. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. There's many ways to do that, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. You will not covet anything that is your neighbor's. Okay? And like I said, covetousness can lead to murder. It can lead to adultery. It can lead to theft. It can lead to bearing false witness. Do you see what I mean? It can even lead to not keeping the Sabbath. You want something so bad, you're going to go buy it on Shabbat instead of going to worship. Right?
Or go to work and earn it on Shabbat.
Yep. So you guys probably already know this, but since it's here, we're going to do the exercise anyway. Just like the 10 Devarim were written on 2 stone tablets, there are 2 parts to them. Can you figure out what that division is? You guys are not children. You probably already know this, but who doesn't know this? Who's having to think about that and is willing to admit that? No shame.
I've heard you teach it, but I've forgotten.
Okay.
I think it's going back to the 2 greatest commandments when Yeshua was asked what's the greatest commandment, and he gave the 2.
Well, you're right, but that's not the question I asked. Who doesn't know it?
I guess I don't.
Well, I think you kind of do, but
I think it's the ones that are pertaining to God and the ones pertaining to your.
yes, but again, you answered the question that I wasn't asking. But that's okay. I was trying to gauge who's having to work a little hard at this. So you were headed in the right direction, Joe. But yes, if you look at the 2 tablets, I kind of think that might be how they were divided. These pertain to God, these pertain to how you deal with people, and that does relate back to the Shema, as Yeshua said, and the other greatest mitzvah. The Shema is Yahweh is your Elohim. That matches the first mitzvah up here, all right? And he's telling us to love him with all of our heart, mind, soul, and Yeshua says, he explains that means our heart, mind, and might. And Yeshua, heart, soul, and might. And Yeshua explains that that's our mind as well, our understanding. And then he says, love your neighbor as yourself. And so these first 5 mitzvot deal with how we love God, and these 5 deal with how we love people. If we love people, we're not going to murder them. If we love people, we're not going to commit adultery with them. If we love people, we're not going to steal. We're not going to lie about them, and we're not going to covet anything they have. I think it's 5 and 5, because the 5th one is kaved et avicha et imecha, and that's honor your father and your mother. But, you know, sometimes you have to do that in spite of bad parents, don't you?
Yep.
And so that's more a form of loving God than it is loving people, in my opinion. And he says, if you'll do that, I'll make you live long on the land. You know? So even though you're giving honor to people, you are doing so sometimes simply because God said so. You know? So I do believe that that's kind of how they divide up, even though that you know, I wouldn't object if someone said, but I think it's, you know, 1 through 4 and 6, or 1 through 4 and 5 through 10. I wouldn't object to that. But I kind of think that there's something special about that honor your father and mother mitzvah. How does that summarize the rest of the Torah?
I would say the rest of the Torah gives further detail to one of the 10.
Well, no, they expound on these, I would say.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah. So some of you may not know this, but there are, and I'm going to need a mathematician, Stephen. There are 613 mitzvot, and out of them, 248, there's a set of 248, and there's whatever the remainder is, there's another set. What's the remainder, Stephen?
I don't know how to subtract.
You're a freaking engineer with a PhD. Come on.
63, 465, 365.
I think it is 365.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's the number of the days of the year and
Yep.
the number of the bones in the body.
Are there 365 bones in the body?
No, 248.
Interesting.
Bone, I think it's parts of the body according to old Jewish anatomy, muscles and bones and organs. That's how they remember it. So it's just an interesting way to divide them. But you know, the rabbis, this is rabbinic, and I don't want you to get bogged down in it, but it does kind of work out that way. And we actually had a spreadsheet. Hilda created it. She may still have it, but you know what probably happened to it? It may be on my computer somewhere. I'll just have to find it. That actually goes through and lists all the mitzvot and which ones are positive and which ones are negative. What does that mean?
The do's and don'ts.
Basically, yes. What you are commanded to actively do and what you are commanded to observe by not doing. When it says observe, that means it's something God told you not to do. Observe that and don't do it. That's a negative command. The positive ones are not, it's not positive because I like them and negative because I hate them. It's positive because they tell you to actually do an action. Okay? And so it's 613, and the way they are divided are similar to the way, so they divide that way, positive and negative. Look at the 10 mitzvot and see, are there positive and negative mitzvot there?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Anything that has the word lo in front of it is a negative mitzvah.
Mhm.
Do not, do not, do not, do not. Okay, so which mitzvot are positive among the 10? No.
You shall.
Remember the Sabbath day and honor your parents.
The very first one, I am Yahweh.
Oh, and then you.
And
Yep.
then remember the Sabbath and honor your parents. Those are the positive.
Yep.
The rest of them are negative.
Yeah, dude.
So 1, 4, and 5 are the positive ones. Okay, so they divide out that way, but then they also divide up those 613. All of them divide up. They're either helping you love God or they're helping you love your neighbor. All 613 of them. There are negative commands that help you love your neighbor. You saw that in the 10 mitzvot. All these lows on the left-hand side are negative. And so you are avoiding offending your neighbor by observing those mitzvot. You can't do those mitzvot, you observe them. Everybody understand the difference, right?
Mhm.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It really does bring to light the simplicity of the Torah. It's kind of one or two things, like either loving God or you're loving your brother and your sister.
Bingo. And some of the things that we do to love God, we can't even do. Some of the positive mitzvot, and it's actually a lot, it's a big number of them. Some of the positive 613 mitzvot we cannot do. Can you guess any of them?
Anything related to a temple service.
That's right. All of the mitzvot that are directly given about temple service, anything that's given to priests, we cannot do. Anything that is directed at women, men can't do. Anything that's directly directed at men, women can't do. So out of the 613, which isn't a huge number, but out of 613, you end up with a very small number that you actually have to think about anyway. Okay? So it even simplifies it more, Daniel. Not only is it just either love God and love people, but, there are very specific things that are in the scriptures that you can look at it, you can study it, you can understand God and Messiah better, especially Messiah, because this whole thing was given to teach us about him. And that's what they're there for. And all of them teach us about him. But as far as what we need to do and observe, it's a very small number of mitzvot. Very small. So
Well, and
it's-
Daniel too, in the, the context of, like, for instance, from a man point of view, we couldn't honor the fact that a woman has the feminine cycle, right, that she has to do. But it also does, bring to light the general nature of life and how that the female cycle is such that you're not supposed to have, communion with her, so to speak, after she's been unclean, so to speak, because of the keeping the female body clean for reproduction. So it all comes back to life and Messiah's love for children and growth, because it's protecting the body of the woman to be able to have children.
Absolutely. It's all done for our good. Absolutely.
Yeah.
One thing to add to that, like Dan was mentioning, to our benefit, I read recently that about circumcising on the 8th day, the baby has more vitamin K on the 8th day, which helps with blood clotting. So that's another
Yeah, and
reason to do it.
for the sake of people on the call that may not understand why you're saying that, or future people watching by video at a later date, why that is important is because a boy is commanded to be circumcised. The father is commanded to circumcise his son on the 8th day of his life. And that seems arbitrary to the Jewish people, but they did it, and they're faithful about it. And then we learn 2,000 years, 4,000 years later, that on the 8th day of a baby's life, his immunity is sky high. And so it's the best day to do it. Absolutely. Okay. So define the following words. We defined tzedakah a while ago. Who can say it?
Righteousness.
Define it a little more deeply, like you did a while ago, Joe.
Right standing before God.
That's right. A clean slate. It's a legal term. It's your debts are wiped clean. Your infractions against the Torah are expunged from your record. That's what tzedakah is. Avon, you may not know. If you pay
Sin.
attention to the 13 attributes, you could infer what avon means.
Iniquity.
Iniquity. Very good. And what is that?
Guilt
Propensity to sin.
or
Propensity
punishment.
to be wicked.
A bone.
Avon is iniquity, but in English, in Bible, what is iniquity? That word comes up a lot. Huh?
Transgression.
No.
Sin.
Iniquity is your propensity to do evil.
Your propensity to do evil, the innate nature in man to do wrong. So it's the motor and the kinetic energy of sin, if you will.
Ooh.
What is chata?
Offer a
Wickedness.
No.
Sin.
No.
Chata is sin, but what is sin?
To miss.
Breaking Torah.
Sin
Transgression.
is breaking the Torah. That's 1 John 3:4. Absolutely. Sin is to miss the mark. It is an archery term. It means to miss the mark.
So kata is missed the mark.
Chata is sin. It means to miss the mark, to fall short, to miss your target. And you could associate that with, remember what we were talking about a while ago, the perfection of Messiah. He never missed the mark, right? His Torah walk was always dead straight up the middle. He never veered to the right, never veered to the left. His arrow never missed the dartboard. He always hit the bullseye.
Mm.
He was perfect. We are not. If you put, you know how at a gun range you pull your sheet and you take it home and you hang it on your wall because you're proud? Ain't nobody doing that. Every one of us, our errors are all over the place. Okay. Kadosh, we've defined that one already, but it'd be a good exercise for someone to say it again.
Holy.
Separately distinct.
Consecrated.
Consecrated. Yeah.
All of those are good. Yeah, distinctly separated, consecrated from everything else. Yeah. Tahor. Anybody know what that is?
Unclean.
No.
Clean or pure.
It actually means pure. That's right.
Cannot keep those words straight. There's like 5 of them.
Me too. The Kama and Tahor.
Yeah, Tama is actually unclean. What is or?
Wait, like Tamal, like unclean, as in a woman being unclean?
Unclean, defiled.
Okay.
Is that with a tav or a tet?
I'm trying to see it in my mind. I want to say it's a tav, but I might have to check.
I'll find it.
I'm pretty sure it's a tav.
Okay.
Or
Light.
light and choshech.
Darkness.
There you go. Any questions before we do?
No,
Is
sir.
that decaf coffee, Daniel?
What's that?
Is that decaf coffee?
Oh, no. No, I'll have to have scotch later to bring me down off the buzz. That's my Thursday night treat. Okay, so what is a tzaddik?
The righteous one.
A righteous one. So start naming characteristics and behaviors of a tzaddik. And you should know this if you do Shabbat. You keep Shabbat in your home, you should know this. You should have a list, bam, right now.
Obedient.
Okay, I agree. Start writing down. Merciful and compassionate, loving, Melanie says. Where could you look? What am I talking about? If you do Shabbat.
In the 13.
No. Well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's Abba. He's perfect. That's his attributes. But we should reflect those, yes.
Yeah.
But what I'm talking about is in the ceremony of Shabbat, Erev Shabbat. That's why I was getting a little less specific, Melanie. Erev Shabbat, there's something that we do that basically says it. Nobody remembers?
No.
If you're a guy, you should rejoice in it. Some of you don't have the advantage of having your wife actually do this for you, but I do.
The prayer. And then the one over you.
Psalm 112. We say, my wife says it over me. It's you know, that we do that. The Messianic or the Orthodox community doesn't do that, but Psalm 112 is about a tzaddik, and it describes his attributes.
Gracious, full of mercy.
Huh?
Gracious and full of mercy.
That's right. He lends. Also Psalm 1. So I would say reference those two Psalms and others and make that list more complete in your workbook as you study. So you're looking at over on the top of the page on my desktop, you're looking at a tzaddik, which is a letter of the alphabet, obviously, but I've told you this before. That is a man on his knees with his hands raised up to God.
Sure is.
See that?
Mm-hmm.
So that is the definition of a tzaddik. And that's kind of what Psalm 1 says, Ashrei ha'ish, asher lo alach ba'atzat reshaim. He doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked, doesn't sit in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the Torah of Elohim, and he meditates on it day and night. So if you want to improve your righteousness, do those things. Right? Or if you want to reflect your righteousness, I should say, and improve your consecration, you should do those things. So the next task we're going to dwell on maybe just a little bit, describe the relationship between tzedakah and kadosh. We kind of did this a little bit, so I want to let you guys kind of step through it. Does anybody want to take a stab at it? And don't say Yeshua, and don't give me just 3 or 4 words.
Well, we receive righteousness when we trust in the sacrifice of Yeshua, but through our actions and our behaviors and how we apply Torah to our lives, that gets us closer to being more like Yeshua, which brings us closer into being kadosh.
Exactly. So we receive righteousness, we reflect or respond to righteousness with consecration. We ourselves consecrate our lives. That burden is on us. The burden of righteousness is on Yeshua. The burden of consecration is on us. And so you can become more and more consecrated and distinct from this world as you go in your walk. And you should. If you're walking with Yeshua, that consecration should continue to go up, and you could increase the size of your tent, if you will, spiritually, simply by separating yourself more and more from the things of this world, more and more from common and profane things. And so some of you might have seen my Facebook, and I was being silly on there because I was listening to secular music. I do that only when I work out, and I kind of, and maybe I shouldn't, but the music that I do choose is benign, I've had to, even lately, I've had to filter out some songs from my playlist that aren't good for a righteous man to listen to, perhaps more and more.
Go away, huh?
What's that?
AC/DC's off the list now, huh?
Oh, AC/DC, all the heavy metal has been off my list for a long time. I was a headbanger in the 80s. But there was a pivotal moment in my life, and a guy named Dennis Ducharme, who my wife has met, was there for that moment when I threw away hundreds of dollars worth of tapes back in the 80s. It was actually probably it was still the 80s at the time. It was 89, I believe, when I threw away hundreds of dollars worth of AC/DC, Sammy Hagar, Van Halen, Aerosmith, all of those, a lot of headbanging bands. And I threw them away because I realized, I know that it was the Ruach telling me, this is the junk that's keeping you from being holy, And so I did. I threw it away, and I would not listen to it. A year later, driving to North Carolina with a Marine buddy of mine, or South Carolina with a Marine buddy of mine, and he was playing some of it, and I was still vulnerable to it, and I hung my head out the window literally for an hour while he listened to his music because he would not turn it off. And I said, okay. So I hung my head out the window because I did not want to listen to it. It doesn't affect me like it used to. I can listen to some of it now, and it has no effect on me. But it did today in the silly things that I was hearing in the words, alternate meaning, alternate lyrics that I was hearing in the words. But it doesn't affect me. It doesn't get into me. You know what I mean?
Hallelujah.
It may be that that Abba will keep driving that music out of my life, because it has been recent where he's driven more of it out of my life. I only listen to it when I'm working out now. But and it's just because the beat of it sometimes helps me
He likes music.
move a little better. So,
But it calls you into the lust for the world. I mean,
it certainly can. And that was the issue that I had with it 30 years ago. It does do that. It puts things in your mind, and sometimes I think it can be a little bit subliminal. And I think that's gets very close to a spiritual level where you are responding to things that you don't even know you're responding to in the realm of the ruach. So,
well, Daniel, how many people will sing a song, like you said, about they'll go to a football game and they'll cheer for the football game, but they won't stand up in even their traditional church and stand up for God. But you'll sing a song, you'll put your heart and soul in that song, but you won't even sing for God on Shabbat. How crazy is that?
Yeah, that is sort of an anomaly in the realm of believers, is that they will happily participate in secular things, but reluctantly participate in consecrated things, and that's a sad state.
I feel music is such a big part of a lot of our lives, and you can be so edified by the scripture songs.
Absolutely.
And there's very little time in our lives for edification sometimes, and it's like you have to guard that so carefully.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I go out and take my walks, I'm typically listening to, our Messianic music, which is all scripture, and
Yeah.
so I know that I'm hearing the holy word of God, and my neighbors are hearing it. I sing in Hebrew all the time out there. They probably think I'm crazy.
I'm so thankful for Mikadem. How do you say it?
Mikadem.
There you go.
Oh yeah, fantastic music.
Can I bring this up? I think it's sort of related to back to like the kind of a characteristic of and behaviors of a tzaddik, and it also goes back to the 10 Devarim. I was talking with two of my friends, and we were actually discussing the mitzvot about do not take his name in vain, and of course the topic, it all centered around whether or not saying GD was bad or not. And so we're kicking this debate, right? And I was like, well, first of all, it's not his name. We kind of went into some of the things we talked about. It's not his name, and kind of getting into it. So is it really truly wrong? Who, no, whatever, but one of my friends had a good way of explaining it. And what he said was, it may not necessarily be breaking that commandment because that's not his name, et cetera, but the rest of the world, to the rest of the world, his name is God. And so when you say that, whether it's actually a breaking of that commandment, a righteous person wouldn't even give up that illusion of breaking that commandment.
It is profane to say GD and to use JC in derogatory statements. Absolutely, it is wrong to do. Does it border on taking his name in vain? Perhaps. I think it depends on the context and the situation. I'm not going to say a blanket statement that every time someone says GD that they're blaspheming. I don't agree with that. But I also don't think that it's appropriate to say. And so, it is profane. It is, and we are told not to use our mouths in that way in both ends of the book. So, I hope I wasn't, appearing to diminish, how wrong it is to say those things. But as far as using his name in vain, I think that is very specific to the 4-letter name. And by extension, Yeshua's name, which by extension would mean Jesus. Okay, so you can take on his name in any form, any appellation that God by, and you use it for vanity's sake, then you're breaking that mitzvah.
Right.
Okay. I'm catching up. So someone go ahead and start answering these. Who is the first Sadiq named in the scripture? Actually, and what I mean by this is not, the guy's name is there and he was a righteous man. That's not what I'm talking about. The first person to be called, it's Sadiq. Anybody?
I'm not sure if that's right, but I'll answer so you get one at least. Noah, was it Noah?
Yep.
Ah, good. Good.
Where in scripture is Yeshua called a Hatzadik, the righteous one? I told you a while ago that he was called that. Where is that?
Who was the second one called Sadiq?
Oh, we got to answer who is the second Sadiq.
Avraham?
I'm pretty sure it was, but I'd have to look, to be honest.
I said Avraham.
It's the book of Hebrews that calls him a righteous man. Indirectly called that in the debate, but it's indirect.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah, but it's not direct. Nobody?
Is it when after the immersion?
No.
So when he says his sandals are more.
I'm still looking for the second man in the scriptures to be called a tzaddik.
Oh, he said Abraham.
I think it is, but I was hoping somebody would find it.
If we can.
It may be on me to find it if you Goobers can't find it, but I'll have to do that later.
I thought it might be Hanoch, but it doesn't say Zadik. Sadiq.
Right.
It's almost implied though, because it says Noah walked with Elohim and Hanoch walked with Elohim.
Yeah, it is implied, but I'm looking for an emphatic statement.
Okay.
And not just an implication. And I want to say it's Abraham, but
It's not Abraham. Could it be Eliyahu?
it wouldn't be that far into the book. We can find it later. Where in the scripture is Yeshua called Hatzadik?
In prophecy or
Shoes are like sandals. Okay. Just guessing.
Somebody get it?
Looking on Aleph 2:1.
It might be called that there. That's not the one I had in mind.
Timothy.
But you can put that down. You said it like you didn't know, but if you know, then
Well, I'm looking at. I have a concordance of a Gentile version.
that's not knowing, man.
I said it like I'm not knowing.
Hey, you ventured though.
Yeah.
Hey,
I've got Masay Hashlakim 3:14.
You call that there? In Hadavar?
Yes.
All right, there's another one.
So would in Yeshayahu 11, when
Nope,
it says,
we're talking about Yeshua. Nope, we're talking about Yeshua. And when I say that, the reason I'm being distinct is because Yeshua is the person in flesh who had the human
Okay.
name Yeshua.
okay,
What was that first one? Masay what?
3:14.
3:14. Thank you.
Daniel, Luca 23:47, the centurion says that Yeshua is a Zadiq.
Okay, write that one down, but there's another one. Yeah.
what was that last one?
Luca 23:47.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, there's one missing that I'm looking for that you guys got to get. You tell me what I got to do.
Just ask your teacher.
Y'all aren't children.
I don't have it. I don't know how y'all find him.
Anybody? Look at Acts 7. There one there? Bueller?
Did you put this one?
Yeah. Needs to be done again though. Is anybody looking?
Yes, it's in
It's a
Acts
long
7.
chapter.
I see one in Acts 7. It's
I'm in
verse.
speed reading class.
I have to zoom in so I can see it.
Acts 7, did you find it?
Yes. I'm trying to see the verse number. It's around the 50s. It's 50. I'm looking at 53. I had it a second ago. Hold on a
52.
second. It's in that. It's on page 955 of the bar. Hold on.
Yeah, 52. Special day has slain those who foretold the coming of Hasadik.
Yes, that's it.
He be pretty good, yeah.
Yes, that's 52. Okay.
Yeah, 52.
Okay. Acts 7.
All right, Luca 23, what was the verse there?
That's good.
23:47.
Yochanan Aleph what?
I don't know, I lost it.
It's a maybe, but we can look.
Let's see if I can find it again.
Lost it. We had another one as well.
Yochanan 2:1.
Yochanan Olive 2:1.
Moses 3:14. Acts.
Okay, let's look at that one in Acts 2. It was 3:14, right?
3.
3, yeah.
But you denied the Kadosh one and Hatzadik.
Yeah.
And make their murder to be given to you.
All right. Yochanan Aleph. Chapter 2, right?
Yes, sir. 2:1.
Yep. Hatzadik. Okay, so those are good. Okay, where was it prophesied that he would be called Hatzadik?
I don't know. Yeshayahu something. No. I don't know.
Oh, likelihood, yes.
53:11.
Okay.
Pretty sure that's it.
How did they find him?
Searches.
Yeah, but what? I don't know.
This one. In PDF. Where in the scripture is Yeshua called the Kadosh HaKadosh one of Israel? Giller?
Yeshayahu 41:14.
No,
No.
that's not Yeshua. Why is it not Yeshua?
He hadn't manifested on earth yet.
Right.
This Gentile concordance only shows things in the Tanakh. I mean,
I'm thinking I might have this one in mind, but it doesn't say of Israel there, so I might have to look into that.
Zachariah.
Wouldn't be in Zechariah because, again, Yeshua is the person in flesh, the man. So nothing in the Tanakh is going to say anything about Yeshua, the human being. Does everybody understand that?
Yeah,
yes, sir.
I was still stuck on the previous question.
Okay. I'm not chastising. I'm just trying to get it locked in that there's a distinction there.
Understood.
All right, the last one we already did. Okay, we got 25 minutes, so we're going to plod on. Any questions about that section, though?
No, sir.
Okay, why would he bless? If you remember in one of our previous lessons, we said that Yeshua came to preach the Besorah and to give abundant life to those who would trust. Avinu, our Father, truly desires to bless his children. It is in his nature to bless. When he called Avraham, one of the first things that he promised is that he would bless him. We are told in Galatians, that we inherit the blessings of Avraham. Because Elohim knew in advance that the nations would be declared righteous, all right, through absolute trust, he first declared to Abraham, as it is said in the Kadosh scriptures, in you shall all the nations be blessed. And so the nations, no matter what our DNA is, all of us can say, hey, we're from the other nations apart from Israel, right? Including Israel. Through Abraham, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. The source of that blessing is our having been justified so that we could be given his Ruach HaKodesh, deposited inside of us, as it reads in Galatim 3:14, that the blessing of Avraham might come on the Goyim through Yeshua HaMashiach, that we might receive the promise of Haruach through absolute trust. So in regard to Kadosh, we know that, and that's what we talked about in the previous section, right, is being Kadosh, right? What does he expect of me? He expects me to be Kadosh. And so we learned what all of that is. And so now let's learn how we do it. And so, what I don't want you to come away with from the previous section is the idea that it is your effort alone that's going to help you to be Kadosh, right? It's the power of the Ruach HaKodesh that is going to help us. That's why humanity could not do it before. They could keep clean lives. They could get a measure of it, but so our consecration is above and beyond what the Jewish people have, because they have that, right? They have the ability to set them. They are some of the most distinct people in the world. Would you not agree? Especially the Orthodox, right? Very distinct. Yeah. But what they don't have is the presence of God manifesting out of them. They have acts and things that they do that make it appear like they might be Kadosh, but it's not actually Kadosh, because the blessing that Avraham was promised, we have received, and that's everybody who trusts in Yeshua. And that blessing, the main blessing, is the gift of the Ruach HaKodesh. And again, I think that my blog, which was apart from this study, I didn't start preparing for this until late this evening. The blog that I wrote today was about all of this. And so I don't think that's a coincidence. The Ruach is Chaim, or life. And it is the ultimate blessing. The blessing of the Ruach manifests to us in many ways and in many, many times over the course of our lives as we walk in trust in Mashiach. Abba gives us the blessing of his presence so that we too can bless others. And so there is a manifestation of God. There is a certain measure of his power that he bestows upon us the moment that we believe, and then throughout our lives. And sometimes it gets amped up, and sometimes for various reasons it gets amped down or drawn back. But it's his presence that is the main blessing. And the reason I'm hammering on that a little bit is because a lot of people teach that the blessing of Abraham is his wealth. And some Gentiles will even say, every Jew you ever see is rich. I have seen impoverished Jews personally. And then, there are impoverished Jews around the world. There is a phenomenon among Jewish people that when they do what they do as community, they do tend to be wealthy. They're smart. They work really hard because they have to. I don't know if you know this, but in the Dark Ages, in the Middle Ages, in medieval times, the Jewish people were the bankers, and they didn't choose it because they're greedy. They were forced into that because they weren't allowed in any of the other guilds. Back in the Middle Ages, they had guilds, and in order to be in the guild, you had to get the approval of everybody else in the guild, and they wouldn't allow Jews in the guilds. Those are basically labor unions. And so they weren't allowed in them. And so the church, the Catholic Church, forced them into banking. And so they got very, very good at it. And they got very, very good at blessing their own people because they're told to, right? Don't charge your brother interest, They were forced to drive the interest rates up for everybody else. They were forced to. The kings told them to. And I'm a historian, so I'll get off on a lot of stuff we probably don't need to get into. But the reason I'm saying that is because I forget why I was saying it, but that's not the blessing. That is hard work that the Jewish people did, and they taught their children, and when they got access into the universities, they worked hard, and they taught their children, and they made sure that they worked and became successful because it's a hard life for Jewish people. That's why they tend to get wealthy, not because of the blessing of Abraham. The blessing of Abraham is this, not money. Okay? Has anybody ever heard that it's money?
Always.
Yeah. Yeah, people insinuate it all the time. They outright say it sometimes. They use it to get money into their pockets. Okay, so this is the blessing. It's the presence of Messiah himself. I will bless you and make your name great, and you will be a blessing. So since Abba said he would bless us and that we would be a blessing, we really need to understand what is a blessing. The word for blessing in Hebrew is berakah. Does anybody see anything in that right off the bat? Berakah. In this case, the bet is not a prefix like it is in Bereshit. This is one word, berakah. It is the verb that means to bless. It comes from the concept of bending down. It's actually, if you look deeper into that paragraph that's below that, it's actually the word to have for a bended knee. It's actually what berech is the word for knee. Birkai kashru mitzom. That's, I believe, in Psalm 6. I say that all the time over sick people. Birkai kashru mitzom. My knees are weak because of fasting, of hunger. Birkai, my knees. The root word for berech, blessing, is in there. So a blessing is something that is done from a place of humility. It's a picture of humility. Berakah. It's a bent knee. That's remember what we talked about right here? Isn't that a guy bending his knee? He's blessed is the man who does not walk. Of course, that word there is happy, which means ashrei, which means happy. Avraham bowed his heart, bent his knee to kneel before Abba, and so Abba blessed him. The arrogant cannot receive a blessing. And I submit to you, an arrogant person cannot give a blessing either.
Daniel, postures say a lot about, they say stand a certain way and that you'll feel confident. Standing in a confident posture will make you feel confident. Being in a humble posture, obviously, psychosomatically makes your mind feel a certain way. Do you feel as though when you're actually on your knees praying that perhaps it, again, psychosomatically does something to your mental, spiritual posture to make you more effective in your prayers?
I think if it's done out of a contrite heart, yes. I think if it's done out of rote, probably not. But in other words, I don't think if you just bend your knees because you think that's what you're supposed to do, I don't think that it changes anything in your relationship with God. But if because you see the magnitude of God that you get down on your knees, then I think, yeah, you're probably in a better position to be blessed. And the thing about our society is it's a conundrum because we teach people to be independent. We teach people to be proud. We teach people to stand up for themselves. We teach people, we try to put confidence and strength and independence in people. And we don't have kings anymore, so we don't know what it means to prostrate ourselves. We don't know what it means to submit physically to someone symbolically. And so, yeah, we rob ourselves of the notion of bending the knee before God. And so it's harder for us, I think, to understand what it means to spiritually bless and be blessed. If you look at the picture right here, that's a very good picture of someone receiving a blessing from, and obviously that guy is depicted to try to look like Yeshua. And it's not a bad picture. He's not quite Jewish enough in that picture. I wish I could find a better one, but no tzitziot for one thing. He looks Greek, but the picture does connote, this person is humbly, bending the knee before him and submitting to him. Look how very similar that is to this, wouldn't you say? Yes, I think there is a psychosomatic sort of response in the body and the mind just by bending the knee, but I'd be careful about just doing it for the sake of doing it, like the Catholic Church does. Everybody gets on their knees 5 times, 10 times in a mass. I've been to at least 2 of them. I was like, the heck are we doing?
To assume that posture, It's not
Yeah,
really-
well, I will give you this. The Catholics are very reverent in their worship. And in a lot of Protestant situations, there's no reverence whatsoever. And so, and I think that's what we're trying to convey here is that there is a reverence for God when you are approaching Him to be blessed by Him. And you don't see that reverence in people today. They demand a blessing from God. They think it's an automatic right that they get because they believe in. I believe in Jesus. I'm blessed. I'm blessed and highly, whatever. They quote Miriam's prayer. So highly favored. That's what I'm blessed and highly favored. Well, yeah, you might be, but you might just be acting a fool. Because blessing is not. It's something that is received in humility. Okay, and if you see anything about Avraham and Yaakov and David and Moshe, their response to their own sin was humility and not arrogance, and not a flippant attitude about it, and not a, oh, well, God's a gracious God, He'll forgive me. I don't have to worry about it. They were contrite and broken over their own sin. And that's what puts us in a state of receiving blessing. All these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you if you shall hearken to the voice of Yahweh your Elohim. You shall be blessed in the city and blessed will you be in the field. So there is a link to Israel and monetary or material blessing, but it's more about sustaining life and not necessarily enriching it. But that is hinged on not the faith of Abraham. That is hinged on what?
Obedience to Yahweh.
Obedience. That's right. So in Jewish thought, to bless means to impart something to someone who is in submission as a gift or for the purpose of lifting them up. The one doing the blessing then has something to give. Elohim gave something to Abraham or imparted something to him. And this is a tackle box verse. And he trusted firmly in Yahweh, and he counted it to him for tzedakah. Bereshit 15:6. Tzedakah is a great blessing which makes us worthy to receive his Ruach HaKodesh so that we can be a blessing. Tzedakah means the slate is wiped clean. We talked about this in the previous chapter. No offenses against the Torah are held against us. Only being clean before Elohim, may we then, only by being clean before Elohim, may we then receive the Ruach HaKodesh. After receiving tzedakah, which is our justification, a clean slate, then we can become kadosh and then bless others by his Ruach. And again, this is why Abba blesses us, that we may be a blessing. So the primary thing that I'm trying to extract out of this idea of the blessing of Abraham is the presence of God and in an abundance such that we can give it away.
Mm.
And oddly enough, I've been praying for that in my own life, not in a selfish way, but with a desire, because there's so much hurt and lack in the world, and I've been praying on a spiritual level. I've been praying that Abba would actually, give me more of who you are so that I can give it away. It's like, and I always think of Kepha. I don't have silver and gold, but what I do have, I give you. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah, rise up and walk. I would love to be able to do that, not for my glory, not for so that I get CNN over here, but so that whoever's hurting can be delivered from it, and even on a spiritual level, and that's really what's plaguing my mind is people are so lost. And they need salvation itself. There's a lot of people who think they believe. They're lost as geese.
Danny, I apologize if this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but whenever you were talking just a little bit ago about the Jewish people having to work harder to get everything and et cetera, it reminded me whenever a couple of years back, I was listening to a recording from Zig Ziglar, and he was talking about the different percentages of the different races of people that are in prisons, And of all those people in prisons, there's a very small number of Jewish people in prisons. And what it came to is he likened it to that every day Jewish fathers would bless their children whenever they leave the house. And it kind of carried with them. So like they're passing that on to their children every day, and it made such a big difference that they don't go out and they commit the crimes, you know.
Right.
I was thinking of that because it's about the blessings and everything, as like, you know, and yes, they don't have Yeshua, but at the same time they're still blessing their children.
Well, there is, it's just like I tried to say a while ago, there is a level of consecration, even though they don't have him. They are distinct in that way, and they're striving. You know, it's sad that they're striving so hard and then still missing the mark, and they can't see Yeshua. But if you go to, what's a sad commentary on America is that we claim to be, I don't know what the number is now, but the last time we claimed as a country to be 85% Christian. The number's probably lower than that now. Let's say 70%.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
That's a majority, isn't it? And so somebody, I don't know who it was, but somebody did an experiment where they went to a major city in America and about 30 times dropped a wallet with money in it to see what people would do. And in America, 99% of the people, and I might be exaggerating the number a little bit, picked up the wallet, took the money, and dropped the wallet and left.
Wow.
And they did the same thing in Israel, and 99% of the people in Israel picked up the wallet, yelled for the person, and gave it back to them. You dropped your wallet with the money in it, and it wasn't a small sum of money. And so the conclusion is that in Israel, people are a little more honest about not taking other people's stuff. Whereas in America, finders, keepers, losers, weepers, you know, which is theft. Remember the forms of theft we talked about?
Yeah.
That's a form of theft. So, yeah, there is a sort of a worldly effort on the part of the Jews to be righteous, and in a lot of ways they succeed more than some Christians did, honestly. Those of us who have the Ruach HaKodesh ought to be convicted by the Ruach HaKodesh when we pick up someone else's wallet behind them and give it back. Oh, wow, there's a $100,000 bill in here. I don't know if that exists, but what if it did and you saw it? You know, you still got to give it to that guy. You know, there was a story a few years ago of a Jewish man here in America who bought a bureau that had a whole bunch of drawers in it. And he found a huge sum of money in this bureau that he had already brought to his house. The deal was over with. He'd had it there for a few days, I think. Opened the drawer and found this big wad of cash money. And he called that person back and said, "You left so many dollars in your desk. Can I bring it to you?" It was a news story because it was so out of the ordinary here in this country. Did anybody see that on Facebook? It's been a while, but it's been, what, 5 or 6 years ago.
His name must have been Daniel, God is my judge, because you care about that stuff, you know, when like...
Well, he's at least a Torah reader and understands it ain't my money, you know. This belongs to the guy who left it there accidentally, cleared it, you know. So that ought to be our mark. That ought to be 70% of Americans should have done the right thing, and they didn't. And that's kind of like what's going on right now. That's a different story. All right, what else? That's probably a good place to stop. Somebody help me remember, because it's going to be harder to remember. This is the paragraph where I'll just change the color.
Page 50.
Page 49.
Yeah, 49.
Oh, 49, okay.
Yeah.
Right, start here.
Blessing is a big part of Jewish life. That's
All right, anything else before we wrap up?
Thank you.
Thank y'all. Hope you got something out of it.
Oh, yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
good, Daniel. Thank you.
Learned a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. We see y'all. Let's say a little prayer. Bina Malkeinu, in the name of your son, Yahweh Yeshua HaMashiach, we do give thanks for our Master Yeshua, whom you've given for us. We ask you to help us to take in everything we learned and extract truth out of it and discard what is false and correct us where we err. And we thank you for it. In the name of your Son, we ask you to be with us until we assemble on Shabbat. In his name.
Amen.
Shalom, shalom.